Welcome to the State of the Nation weekly update. It's upon us. The general election 2024 is here, and we are doing something a little bit different for the weekly update. We're going to go through the election process. We're also going to talk about the parties that we have had so many conversations with and some of the information that we've got. We're going to share it so that when you get to the ballot box, you can make the best decision. So let's have a look at the elections 2024. And before we begin, let's thank Pace Car Rental, who have been our partners in bringing us a lot of this election coverage. And I'd like to thank you, the people that have watched us. We have had more than 5.5 million views on YouTube alone, people listening to us, many interviews with many prominent people, a lot of analysts. And I really want to thank you for helping to establish this channel, the State of the Nation, as your source for information around South Africa's economy and South Africa's political scene. So let's get into it. We've made mention of just how important this coming election is and what the implications are. I want to give you some information that may be helpful to ensure that you can make the best decision that serves you the best. So let's first talk about the actual ballot. What is going to face you when you get into that ballot box on the 29th of May? Well, for starters, you're going to get 3 ballots. And I just want to briefly explain to you. I know there's been a lot of information out there, and by now I'm pretty sure you understand what to do. You're going to get 3 ballots. So let's just talk about the first and most important ballot you're going to get is a blue ballot, which is the national ballot. And that is to vote for the party represented by the face, the leader of that party, that is going to give those parties parliamentary seats and be able to give the majority party the right to put their candidate forward and probably be elected as the president of the country. So the national ballot, quite simply, is the important one, and that is to vote for which party is represented in Parliament, the blue ballot. Whoever you fancy to run the country, that's the ballot to use for there. I'm going to skip straight to the regional ballot. Now, this is the one that is likely to cause the most confusion, and largely because of the name. The regional ballot was a compromise decision when the Electoral Act was challenged to allow independent candidates. You're going to get a regional ballot, and that's the one in orange. And think of that as almost a sort of an assistance to the national ballot. Basically, on the regional ballot, you can have some independent candidates that aren't on the national ballot. And basically, those votes will be taken into account after they've allocated most of the seats off the national ballot. So it is of some importance, and it will perhaps help a few smaller parties or independents squeak into Parliament. But in most cases, it's just an extension of what you want to have happen and the party you want to represent you nationally. So the national ballot is blue, the regional ballot is orange. In essence, it's a subsection of the national ballot, the regional ballot. So please understand that the regional ballot has got nothing to do with the province. It doesn't even have anything to do with the region. It has to do with the national ballot. And really, you probably, whoever you fancy to make up the government, you probably want to vote for them on the regional ballot unless you are really in love with one of the independent candidates. And then we get to the third ballot that you're going to see, which is a pink ballot, and that is your provincial ballot. Now, this is a very important ballot because that is for you to decide who you want to run your province, wherever you are watching this from. You know, we've said so many times with so many analysts and so many politicians just how important the provincial governments are going to be. South Africa has a system which really has been hidden in a little bit of darkness, and largely because of the dominance up until now of the ANC, and that is of the National Council of Provinces. Basically, when Parliament passes some kind of bill, it goes to the National Council of Provinces to approve that bill or not. We don't really think much about it because up until now in the history of South Africa, the National Council of Provinces has been dominated by the ANC. At the moment, in past elections, they've had at least 8 of the provinces, and at some stage all 9, and then they could just pass any piece of legislation that Parliament puts forward, and it has become known as a bit of a rubber stamp. Well, in this election, there are at least 5 provinces that the ANC will not get more than 50%. So suddenly, those provincial ballots really matter. And in the big areas, the big economic hubs, Gauteng, Western Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, it's almost certain that the ANC won't get an absolute majority in those areas. So your party may very well become a party that could govern 1 or 2 of the provincial legislatures, and then suddenly the National Council of Provinces might start meaning something. So I would say be careful. The pink ballot is there for you to vote for who you want to run your province. So we know down in the Western Cape, the Democratic Alliance has run that for about 15 years. Their majority is under some question. They've got threats from all over the show. So provincial ballot there is really going to be crucial. Gauteng, the ANC, by all polls, look like they're going to get somewhere in the region of the high 30s or low 40% mark, which means that you could have a coalition government in Gauteng, and similarly in KwaZulu-Natal, where we've got a very, very murky picture as to who's going to run that particular province. It's going to be very, very important, and it's going to be a very big source of discussion after these elections. So 3 ballots, 2 are roughly the same, and that is the national and regional ballot. And then the pink one, which is a provincial one, is who do you want to run your province. What is at stake in these 2024 elections? Well, it is the first time, I think, in South African history that we are very unlikely to see one party get a majority. The way majorities are calculated in South Africa, we run a proportional representation system. That means that every vote is counted and seats are allocated by dividing the number of votes cast by the 400 seats in Parliament to give a number of how many votes you need to get one seat. In the past, when the ANC were getting upwards of 60%, they would get a comfortable majority in government. They'd have a lot of people in Parliament. They could then choose the president. They could choose the speaker. They can choose the cabinet ministers with no consultation. If the polls are to be believed, and if a lot of the commentators are to be believed, and I happen to believe this as well, it looks like the ANC is going to drop below 50%, which means that they're going to have to collaborate, which means that your vote is very, very important regardless of who you voted for. Because we may get down to a situation where a party that just has 1 or 2 seats can influence whether South Africa passes legislation or how South Africa behaves. Gone are the days where an ANC majority can protect a president when he's spending money on his homestead, or a president when he's hiding money in his couch, or a cabinet minister that steals money, or anything. That's going to be really difficult to do, because if you vote for any party, you can justifiably ask why that party is supporting that particular act or that particular action. Either way, your vote is going to count. So please understand that there is a lot at stake in this election. And if you don't believe me when I say that the ANC's majority is under threat, just consider that in 2021, in the local government election, which I know you're voting for a slightly different thing, if you counted up all the votes that happened nationally, the ANC only got 47%. So I think we can see something similar happening, because they surely haven't behaved terribly well since then. And this is going to become an important reason for you to vote. Please go out there and understand that your vote is going to count. Right. If you don't think your vote matters, just consider the case of Eskom. Why do we suddenly have the lights on? Yes, they're burning diesel, but by all accounts, the management of our power stations is infinitely better than it used to be. And if you think that that sounds a little bit suspicious, you're quite right, but it's suspicious for the right reason. The ANC understood that that could have caused a rout if there was load shedding at election time. And what they did was they got those deployed cadres of theirs that are running those power plants to suddenly do a better job. It's that simple. The good old carrot and stick, the stick actually came out, and those power plants were run better, and we now have an energy availability factor of 70%. And let's be fair, your solar power at home really does help. But the point is that Eskom are doing a better job. Why? Because the government realized, or the ANC realized, that this was going to cost them politically. So once again, if you're looking for more reason to vote, understand that competition works. Right, so let's just have a look at the parties themselves and what they stand for. And I'm going to do this in the way of summary. We have spoken to leaders from just about every party that matters. And, you know, in those discussions, and often some of the stuff you see off camera, you get a good sense of what the party offers. So let's just go through them. We've had limited access to the ANC, the African National Congress, but obviously, as the election got a little closer, suddenly they were answering our calls. And we did get to interview probably their third or fourth most powerful person in the party, and that is Dr. Gwen Ramokgopa, who's the Treasurer General of the ANC, probably one of the more competent members of that particular party. So I think we have an insight, and obviously they've always been the area that we have discussed the most in South African politics. What does a vote for the ANC mean? Well, I think that it's been said before that if you vote for the ANC, you're going to get more of the same. They have proven incapable of changing the way that they are. They're an old-fashioned organization. They've grown very accustomed to power, and they've grown very accustomed to the trappings of power. They are completely in love with their blue lights, and they need the money that comes with some of their low-level business dealings that are done off balance sheet, the corruption that we know so well, right? That party can talk about renewal, but it's almost impossible for them to renew themselves. So a vote for the ANC means that you like where South Africa is, you like the fact that we've got 50% unemployment. There's absolutely nothing that they have said in their manifestos and their action that could lead to a considerably better outcome. We've seen in the sixth administration, which is coming to an end, that President Ramaphosa doesn't really like to act and make decisions, and this has caused South Africa to slow down to his pace, which is virtually a crawl. So a vote for the ANC is more of the same. The Democratic Alliance is going into this election looking quite different to the way they looked in 2019. They went into the 2019 election with Mmusi Maimane as their leader. This time they go in with John Steenhuisen as a leader. A lot of their black leadership has left them, and they are going to hurt because of this. There is no doubt that the DA still does a very effective job in holding Parliament to account. There is no doubt that if we didn't have them in Parliament, didn't have them taking legal actions when the government has overstepped, the country would be in a considerably worse position. Is it true that where the DA governs, they govern better? Well, the jury's out. They've been in charge in the city of Tshwane for 8 years, and we know that the problems that they've had. They seem to be tackling it now. However, they do have a real tone deafness to them where they've struggled to appeal to the mass of South Africans. And I think they're just going to be happy if they can cling on to their 20%. They've given no indication that they want to grow. I have to say that some of their young leaders are very, very exciting. You know, people like Chris Pappas, who we spoke to recently, Celia Brink, who's the mayor in the city of Tshwane. These are quite impressive people. We need to see those impressive people at the top end of the party, and we also need that party to appeal to a greater part of the South African public. The Democratic Alliance is looking to hold on to their 20%. They are part of the multi-party charter. Let's see what happens to them. The third biggest party is the Economic Freedom Fighters. And I'm sure there's many people that know that have not been a fan of the policies of the EFF. We have had a few discussions with some of the EFF people, but none of the senior management. And we do know that that is run very much as a top-down organization. Very hard to get a sense of the EFF. Their manifesto is a nightmare. If you read their manifesto, which I must say is the most comprehensive manifesto out there, which is code for it was the longest, about 200 pages of it, really looks like it was written by Mao Zedong himself. It is craziness. No property rights. That'll be taken away. So all land will be owned by the state. If the EFF were to get voted in, you'd have a financial calamity because suddenly every home loan would be worthless, right? They want to nationalize banks. They want to open borders. We understand all of this. We also understand that there's many people that say, don't carry on about this because they're not going to win the election. What concerns me is we're heading towards coalition partners. They're very noisy. They are already the ANC's coalition partner in a number of metros. If they do get into close to the seat of power, there's a chance that some of their crazy policies become law. We've already seen the National Health Insurance Bill become an act. These are the kind of, and that's well before that particular industry is ready. So please understand why I've carried on about the EFF. Their policies are ruinous for the country. And right now, we have to take them at what they say in their manifesto. I'm sure it will change as the party develops. But that's what you're getting if you vote for the EFF. We have had access to the Inkatha Freedom Party, the IFP. And we've had their leader, Velenkosini Tlhabisa, on the State of the Nation a number of times. This will be the first election that they approach without Mangosuthu Buthelezi as their leader. The IFP has certainly developed. I think they're a better party than when Buthelezi was in charge. They are a conservative Zulu party. They do not have national aspirations at this stage. They're very regional, very Natal-based, but very solid. Also a solid member of the multi-party charter. And it's going to be interesting to see whether an IFP without Buthelezi grows. I suspect that they will do. The new kids on the block, the people that have shaken up this election have been Mkhonto Wesizwe. They've become the story of this election, and that's largely because of the popularity of Jacob Zuma. But don't be confused. We also had a look at their manifesto, which is kind of like a more old-fashioned, traditional version of what the EFF has to say. Once again, you won't own your property rights. The government will own everything. But a great deal of trust will be put in the hands of traditional leaders. We know a lot about what Mkhonto Wesizwe don't want. They don't want Cyril Ramaphosa. They don't want the Roman Dutch law system. I love the way they say they don't want it because they're neither Roman nor Dutch. Well, that's a little bit silly because that's just become the name for legal systems as they're used around the world. They want a traditional African legal system administered by traditional leaders. Mkhonto Wesizwe are going to have a real problem after this election. It is clearly a Zuma family project. And, you're going to struggle to grow when you have to stand behind Zuma and his sons and daughters. I suspect they'll do quite well in this election and fade very fast thereafter because they are not going to attract people to go to Parliament, not the best people, and there's going to be infighting deluxe in that party. Patriotic Alliance, we've spoken to Gayton McKenzie a number of times, and Charles Cilliers, their chairman. And, it's always difficult when you speak to the Patriotic Alliance because a lot of what they say makes sense, right? Gayton McKenzie is charismatic. They do understand business, but you can't help viewing them with a bit of suspicion. Every single time they've had the opportunity, they've given their vote to the ANC, and I suspect they will give their vote to the ANC after this election as well to give the ANC a majority. So please understand that the Patriotic Alliance is probably a vote for the ANC, despite what Gayton McKenzie says, right? He blames everything on the DA, but at the end of the day, it's him that's signing these agreements, and I see no indication that it's going to stop, and that may be catastrophic at a national level. And I think they'll do it in return for a couple of big tenders. And so just understand what you're getting with the Patriotic Alliance. Freedom Front Plus, charming bunch of people, very conservative, very white, looking to protect white Afrikaner interests and to be part of the multi-party charter. Not sure where that party goes to from here. They don't seem to have any growth plans. A vote for them is solid, but, they're going to sit there and do what? But a nice bunch of guys, and you may feel safer with somebody that's trying to wind the clock back 30 years. Action SA, we've had great access to Action SA. It's difficult for them. They're entering an election for the first time. Herman Mashaba, man who understands business, sadly made a big issue around illegal foreigners, which sort of got them tainted as a xenophobic party. But I do think that they probably have the most common sense pro-business policies of all the parties. It's going to be interesting to see what they do. The pollsters didn't like them, but they've done a hell of a lot of work on the ground. Action SA, this could be a very interesting election. I think they're going to be happy if they get 2%. So let's see what happens with Action SA. I wouldn't mind to see them doing well because they do understand free markets. They do understand property rights. Rise Mzansi, they've had a good run into the election. Songezo Zibi's outfit. And I think the best way to describe them is that these are all the clever blacks that Jacob Zuma chased out of the ANC. I think in a different time, they would all be in the ANC and they'd be cabinet ministers by now, the leadership of Rise Mzansi. Some competent people. What concerns me about Rise Mzansi is their policies are purely ANC policies. And I suspect that one of the surprising outcomes of the election will be that Rise Mzansi will probably join a coalition with the ANC because their policies are identical to the ANC and quite a long way away from the multi-party charter. Look for more BEE under Rise Mzansi. Look for more of the same old that you see with the ANC. Build One South Africa, Musi Maimane, an interesting party. I think the most surprising thing that they did was to give 100,000 signatures to the IEC when they were registering the party. I really like Musi Maimane. He's a great guy. He seems to have problems making hard decisions. He seems to be Cyril Ramaphosa's stablemate. When the issue is difficult, his sort of natural response is, come on, guys, let's just get along. I don't know if they're going to make much of an impact. There's an edge that's missing to Build One South Africa. They do have some good ideas, but they seem to have no grasp of the economy and what it takes to grow an economy. It's all about Ubuntu, and Ubuntu doesn't pay the rent. So who should you vote for? Well, quite simply, I'm going to leave you with these few words. Vote for a party that will make a difference in the living standards of South Africa. Vote for a party that will allow doctors to run hospitals and not steal the money intended for that hospital. Vote for a party that can grow the economy by realistically cutting red tape and some of the bad business legislation that we have out there. Vote for a party that's quite boring, that'll keep the lights on, they'll keep the water running, and they'll keep your rubbish collected. Once we find a government that can do those things, it'll be fine. The South African citizens will do the rest. So find that party, make your X, and go and vote.